Our last talk for this session is Block 48, Chlorinated Solvent Remediation, the Battle of Client Expectations and Reality. Kyle Hayes, Environmental Department Manager of Terracon, is going to be presenting. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you. All right, this thing on? Good. All right, so before I get started, I'm going to say that this is a very interesting audience. Well, it was. There's one person just left. Good. Okay. So now, a lot of people have been involved in this project before I got involved, before Terracon got involved, and that's probably the situation for many of you who are consultants or maybe involved with other organizations, and you purchase property or you acquire it in whatever method it is. Regardless, there's layers and layers of history associated with this site, including the consultants involved and the parties involved. So the reason I say that is those of you who are in the room who have some skin in this game, just leave your questions to the end. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the reality of consulting and the reality of remediation and kind of that juxtaposition that we all, as consultants at least, get into, which is how do we manage expectations and reality of the challenges that come up through both remediation and development in this case. All right, so we're going to take you through a bit of a story. So once upon a time, back in 2019, yes, pre-pandemic, we all made it. We did a phase 1 ESA for a national account client of ours. This site is in Jacksonville, Florida. It encompassed a full city block. It was adjacent to the courthouse, pretty high-profile area, and really was a nondescript site. It's been empty for a long time. It was used for parking for the courthouse, as well as parking and lay-down yard, et cetera, for the construction of the renovation and construction of the courthouse that was next adjacent to it. So our client planned to purchase this property. They wanted to redevelop it with a 9-story office building, as well as a 9-story parking garage, taking up the entire city block. That building was slated to be for a large-scale utility company in Jacksonville. One person from that group may be here. It's possible. Don't raise your hand yet. All right, so the client planned to purchase this, and then we started saying, well, okay, what was the backstory here, right? And that's the whole thing. All of us who do due diligence for a part of our livings, we had to go back in time, and so that's what we did. So essentially, back to 1884 to present, the site's been actively used for various things. There was a hotel, telephone business, dwellings, paint shops, a lot of automotive facilities came and went. And by 2007, like I said, all that was gone. It's just a parking lot. One thing that should be noted is the hotel itself. If any of you familiar with sandboard maps, you have to study them with a magnifying glass. There's one little area that says dry cleaner. Actually, it says cleaner. That's the script, right? All right, so part of our process also identified that work had already been done on the site. The city of Jacksonville owned the site, and their consultant did some work, and we kind of looked through what had been done and identified some of the things you see here. One of them, namely the chlorinated solvent impacts to groundwater, which were on the southwest portion of the site, as this is, your typical suite of solvent issues to groundwater. So your PCE, TCE, cis, and your vinyl chloride. So this was down to 15 to 35 feet or so. At that point, the prior consultant was doing quarterly natural attenuation monitoring and going through that process to get the data they need to make some sort of argument or to develop a remedial action plan. At that point, we got involved with our client purchasing the property or working towards purchasing the property from the city. All right, so we're setting the stage for future development and trying to determine, okay, what are we going to do here? What's the overall game plan with redevelopment, and how are we going to tie that to the timeline that the client needs? So, you guys read that? I can't, no. Okay, so anyhow, so back in December of 2019, they wanted to start construction and work on the property. They also wanted to get to a clean closure of the site, some level of closure, ultimately clean if possible, and clean by means of RMO1. However, that was quickly diffused, considering the contaminants and the timeline that they wanted. So at that point, we went into discussion on what type of aggressive remedial action can we put in place to at least get this to a point where they're comfortable moving forward with redevelopment, and they feel like they're going to get to some point of closure in order to meet the expectations of their future end user, as well as the expectations of those who actually want to buy the property from this client of ours. Essentially, they're a build-to-suit, lease-back type client, and they have a timeline to do that, by which their financials, spreadsheets make sense. They're either going to make money or they're going to lose it. And so time is of the essence. I don't know any deal that doesn't include a timeline and a lot of money at stake. So that said, we were put under a lot of pressure to come up with some sort of plan. So we developed a remedial action plan, and we moved through the steps to take care of the impacts. So this is what it looked. Let's see if I can. Hold on a second, guys. I know I have a pointer somewhere. There we go. All right. So this is what the site looked like when we started doing work, and this is essentially what they wanted to get it to. All right. So nothing, something. Moving forward, we were asked, how can we get to an endpoint by April of the following year, and so they could start redevelopment. Well, obviously that wasn't going to happen, but we would do our best. So we'll get into the details of our remedial strategy and what we had to do. So Chad, you can raise your hand. So Chad's over here. Chad's now with Terracon. We brought him to the dark side. Thank you, Chad, for coming on over. But Chad was with Regenesis. We have Regenesis here too. Just trying to plug you guys, but you didn't have to show up. There you go. All right, very good. So we worked with Regenesis. We worked with Chad at the time, who was with Regenesis, and kind of tried to come up with a way to tackle this, if you will, with as much firepower as possible. Again, we had a quick timeline imposed on us by the client, and that was dictated by the fact that we actually had an open site to work on, and that was not going to be the case for too long. So I developed a remedial action plan with the help of Donna Klein, who happens to be sitting on this panel, and we decided to I guess we finalized the decision to use the applications that Regenesis was offering, and you can see those there using the plume stop, liquid activated carbon, and then all of their registered trademark names that you guys can read. I'm not going to go through them. So what was proposed was a series of 30 injection points. More importantly, beer. So Chad and I had a friendly little wager that we could develop this remedial action plan and get it submitted and turned back by the DEP in 2 weeks to meet deadlines. We made that happen. That would not happen now. Is there any regulators in the room? No? Good. Okay. So you're not getting it in 2 weeks these days at all. In fact, I don't know how we did it then, but I guess it was written well. That's all I can say. So anyway, we won a case of beer. Chad actually did come through, and he sent it to me. It was nice. All right, so we go through, we do the injections. We put 30 points in the ground. You can see it on the prior slide. Possibly, let me go back. Yeah, so you can see Yeah, injections, you get the picture, right? We've got the rig out there, we're getting things nice and dirty, and we're making things move in the subsurface and hopefully go away. That's the plan. So we start doing our sampling. We got the DEP also to agree that we could do our post-active remediation in January of 2020. Mind you, we did the injections in December of 2019, so we didn't give it a whole lot of time to, activate, if you will, since we're using activated carbon. Right, Chad? Thank you. Dad joke. All right, moving on. January 2020, we do the first quarter. Things are looking pretty good. We're seeing some things and some concentrations exceeding the GCTLs, but it's actually lower than it was previously. We move into April, and things continue to decline and are looking pretty good, but of course we're still exceeding GCTLs. That's okay, right? We don't care if we're exceeding GCTLs. We're trying to, at this point, get to a closure that is showing shrinking and or stable, right? We've all, hopefully, many of us have been down this road before. Then things start to progress in July 2020. We're only looking at vinyl chloride at that point. That's the only well, and I'll show you it's hard to tell you here, but the wells are in this corner of the property. And then we hit the fun time in this saga, and that is when they say, hey, guess what? Redevelopment is moving forward, and we are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, oh, we didn't get there, right? 4 quarters. We couldn't get there. They said, no, you need to abandon everything, time to move on. Not what you want to hear when you're seeing these results that quickly after remediation. So we told the client, look, whatever we can do to keep them there would be great. And they said, that's impossible. We're going to have to move forward. And at that stage, you're going to have to basically remove these wells, come back, reinstall them, and you guys see where we're going here. Not good. So site redevelopment occurs. We've got a 3-month groundwater discharge permit that we obtained from JEA, and that's ironic, and you guys will know why later. What could go wrong, right? So the client was, forewarned that, hey, we have a very limited time frame. Maybe we should wait and do this later, right? Maybe it would be better to get some site redevelopment work going and maybe do the injections at a point in time before you start doing some heavy earthwork and start moving some things around. But they felt pretty confident in our plan and said, hey, let's go for it. So we did. But what happens when you dewater? Lots of stuff can happen, right? We're in the downtown area. There's just a lot going on there. This is not the only site that's impacted, guaranteed. Is it the only one that's registered and impacted? Probably not, right? There's multiple undocumented sources, and again, layers and layers of history. So could you bring offsite impacts onto the site? Of course. What happens to those products? I guess we'll find out, won't we? Oh, wait, then there's more. Now, I can't get into the details of this too much for the sake of just client confidentiality, if you will. But let's just say that things took a little longer than they were intended to get to the site redevelopment goals of actually going vertical on the site. And what does that really mean for this story? It means that dewatering, was actually, it was done a bit more aggressively than expected. There was a lot of things that needed to be done to remove some things that you may be able to see in this picture. And without going into great detail, lots of water, lots of subsurface removal of things, lots of things were identified and found and removed, and that took time, that took money, and that made a client very unhappy. So was that our fault? No, they bought this property knowing that nobody ever wanted to buy it before them, right? It sat there for years and years, and I think our city representative that owned it was happy to see it go once they realized, what they had kind of handed off. So that said, yes, there was a hotel there. There was a parking garage there at one time. There was lots of different buildings and uses. Let's just say a lot of that never went away. You just couldn't see it. So moving forward, what happens? Following the development, we go back in, and at this point, we've got a lot going on this property, right? The client's saying, hey, we want you to go back out there and take care of this. And mind you, this is the type of client that has maybe 5 or 6 different parties that you have to talk to get an answer or to get anything moving. And one's environmental and most of them are construction. They don't mix. We don't mix with redevelopment partners when there comes to general contractors. It just doesn't happen very well in the real world. So this client was like their own worst enemy, and it took a while, but we finally got the GC, which was their own general contractor in-house, to give us the green light to get out there and work around other contractors. And you can see they're going vertical, so we're putting wells in adjacent to what was the right-of-way and within the building footprint itself, and generally making the general contractor furious every day. Good times. So we installed these wells. We get everything taken care of. We start doing sampling, and of course, lo and behold, the subsurface concentrations and everything is just out of whack. Not what we were dealing with back in, I think it was July at that point. So, we've basically kind of mixed up the entire subsurface matrix of groundwater, and we've removed a bunch of soil, and we've agitated lots of things, and we've dewatered this site, which is again a full city block, for 3 months plus aggressively. So of course we install these wells and things look completely different. Not so good. We're at the point now of going through a couple sampling events. We're demonstrating increases at this point of the concentrations, and the client is understandably upset, but also understands that if you go back to one of my bullet points before, they were forewarned, right? What's going to happen if you start dewatering this site? And essentially what happened is they removed all of the things that we spent lots of money on us working on to inject down into the subsurface. They removed it all, and then who knows what else they pushed around the site and moved on to the site, right? So things got really interesting after this point. We had to essentially show them that we had we had to still demonstrate shrinking and or stable in some capacity. And how are we going to get there at this point? Nothing makes sense, and actually nothing was aligning. So I'll show you here. This is the first round, and if you can see this outline of the building, this is the future building at this point, and this is the actual building that's going vertical at this point in the second round here. So second round, first round, you see where the injections were installed or implemented, and then we had to shift over to the west. You can see that's the impact that the dewatering had on the site. Essentially, it moved everything from this area over to the west. And so that created a situation where we actually had to install additional well further off to the west to further delineate things and determine exactly where the footprint of our impacted groundwater was, both vertically, horizontally, same song and dance we have all gone through from an assessment standpoint. So essentially starting over. Of course, then we had to redevelop a RAP, go back to the DEP, which didn't happen in 2 weeks this time, unfortunately. I didn't get any more beer. And the client was not very happy about the timeline, and at this point the GC is getting very upset that we are going to go back out, not only install wells that he has to protect during his construction, but at this point we're going to go into finished surfaces, raised planters, all sorts of fun things, and inject. At this point, last time it was 30, now we're doing 45 injections points, and many of them using a dolly rig because we're in the middle of raised areas and small areas with height restrictions and things like that. Most of this could have been prevented, again, had the client maybe given us a different timeline to work within. But hey, that's the world we live in. We do what we're told sometimes. So here we are looking at this layout, and then we're injecting this cocktail, as I put it, again, using the same things. At that point, I think we changed some of the cocktail just slightly, and I think that was simply because some of the remedial products had been enhanced, and some different technology was there for one of them. So here's some examples of what we had to deal with. You can see the plate glass here. This is actually inside the building. And of course, you see that the liquid activated carbon's not pretty stuff, right? It didn't make the general contractor happy. It didn't make anybody very happy that we had to then go and install these holes in their foundation. Now, the other part of this is during everything that we did, of course, we had volatiles and we had groundwater issues, et cetera. They decided to put a vapor mitigation system in place. We helped them engineer that. We instituted that. We oversaw the installation, but then we just drilled some holes through it. So they weren't too happy about that either. Now, there was a way to go back and overlap the membranes and get it all fixed, and it passed the smoke test, and it works. But bottom line is you end up with this ripple effect of one thing leading to another, and here we are working alongside, and I didn't show it on here, but Terracon's extremely big on safety. It's a big part of our culture. We had to stop working multiple times because wrenches and various pieces of equipment, as well as pieces of the building itself, were falling on top of us. So good times. Let's see, moving on. So following 4 quarters of Parm, all right, so we did our work. We're successful with the injections. It's working again. We did 4 quarters. We're demonstrating that it's shrinking, stable. And luckily, the city, of course, this is going, I never mentioned really, but this is the good picture to show you. The plume, again, was basically, it was here, and then it shifted to here. Right? And there's some things that occurred during that shift that we really can't explain which we tried not to explain, and this is why it's good that regulators aren't here, right? Yeah, we don't want to talk about some of this stuff in detail, but the bottom line is we were able to do some statistical tests on the data because we initially said, hey, look, it's stable, everything looks good, and the DEP said, no, we don't think so. We really need to do more. That made our client even happier, right? So we said, look, let me go talk to my guy Chad and let him do some statistical, wizardry, I guess we'll call it. And here we are. We got to this point where the DEP said, okay, I think we're comfortable. We want you to put this into a final document and send it in. So that's kind of where we are today. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The bottom line is we were able to reinstall, do all of these injections and get to a point where we were back to where we were when we first started this process over a year prior. And then at this point, remember, this started in 2019, and fast forward, that report that I was just referencing just got submitted, 2 weeks ago, Chad, I think? So, this has been going on for a lot longer than everybody anticipated. Meanwhile, JEA, this is the JEA headquarters. They moved to this site. This is the JEA headquarters in downtown Jacksonville. JEA is here, learning about the saga of their building. As I understand it, Alex didn't know about that, so here we are. There's a lot more to it that I'll share with cocktails later. So, site closure. NFA and SRCO completion report submitted in October of this year. We recommended RMO 3. Mr. Jeff Foster, I don't know if you're the one signing off or Eric Fuller, but somebody with the city was engaged early in the process to ask, hey, look, you guys own this property. You knew about these things. Your prior consultant did some work. We know there's impacts. Is everybody comfortable if we get to this end point will you sign off? And I know Joe can probably attest to how many times you try to get restrictive covenants in place, and the off-site parties and those third parties just say, hell no, I'm not doing that. Well, you guys clean that stuff up, man, it's yours. But luckily the city's got plenty to deal with, and we're comfortable with it. The other side of this is what the prior consultant did, and that is soil impacts were on the site too. Many of them were actually removed for some of those things I didn't explain that caused the client considerable amounts of money. And that's the other part of this, right? None of this happens without somebody spending money. And some of the decisions don't happen unless you have a good plan in place. We had a good plan. They basically took it and pushed it down the drain after we instituted it, and then we had to go back and redo it. So managing those client expectations, managing what their expectations should be from a dollar standpoint is extremely important. And on top of that, you've got situations where the clients just don't care, right? It just needs to be done, get it done, and we'll talk about all this later. In this case, we ended up also using brownfield dollars to help. So tying it back wasn't really part of my presentation, but we did recoup many of these costs using Abysra under the VICTIC program with the state of Florida. So that's the end of it, we hope, right? But the big takeaways here are quite simple, right? Manage your client's expectations, push back on what it is they might need to do versus what reality is. And in this case, realize that if you're going to put in a pretty hefty dewatering system, you're basically just going to spend time and money and then take it and put it right down the drain, which we had to do. And that further complicates things and messes with the redevelopment timeline in the end, right? So that'll leave it there. We have 3 minutes and 19 seconds left.
Thanks. I think we're actually past noon, so I think we're actually starting lunch now. I think I'll just ask one quick question or one observation and see if you've come across it yet. We've seen at the department level some pretty significant pushback as it pertains to defining when active remediation ends and actually PARM starts. So we've seen a lot of situations in the last year and a half, 2 years, where if you've injected an amendment in the ground, you basically need to prove that that amendment that you put in the ground is no longer contributing to groundwater concentration reductions or active remediation. And until such time you can demonstrate and prove that, PARM clock doesn't start. So I don't know if you've had those conversations with the agencies or where things are at, but just be forewarned.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it has come up in discussions. Obviously, we're doing what we do as consultants. We're pushing the envelope as hard as we can, but you're right. There are situations that come back, and it's not just that, right? I mean, every regulatory reviewer that we have recently has come back and pushed hard on something. There's a justification for everything that they essentially. If you want to get restrictive closure these days, and again, this is there's no regulators around, right? But restrictive closure is not easy to get these days in comparison to how it used to be. Things have changed in some mindsets, and that's just my opinion. What I'm dealing with.
One thing, Jim, I'd say for Genesis, when a lot of those discussions first started, Genesis was really active with the department and trying to study that idea of when PARM should start. So, I mean, I think that for all of the amendment scientists, I think that's something the department would welcome information on, because it's a struggle. It is difficult.
All right, thanks. I think lunch is now ready. I'm not sure exactly where, but it's around here somewhere. Thanks.